As fallout from the new coronavirus has dominated our thoughts and the majority of news headlines, it's strange to think that 3 weeks ago, the race for the 2020 presidential election was dominating the news cycle here in the United States. Now, many are wondering how the election process should be adjusted to keep people safe. For perspective on this and more, I spoke with UMass Amherst professor of political science, Ray LaRaja. I first asked him his reaction to the impact of COVID-19 on our political process.
Well, there's no precedent for this. Politicians are scrambling to make adjustments, trying to learn things as they go. And we have an institutional system that is unique. We have a federal government, but we also have states that are doing their own thing. And that's part of the uniqueness. It's part of the challenge of dealing with this crisis politically.
What do you make of the fact that much of the leadership that we've seen started locally, then sort of folded out statewide, and the federal government has been doing what it's been doing?
This is a feature of federalism. And, we know that the disease is happening in different areas of the country. New York's obviously taking a big hit. California's taking a big hit. So those governors are out in front because it's right in their faces right now. So the good thing about federalism is that it allows that kind of flexibility to deal locally with the problems. The concern is this is obviously an international epidemic and certainly a national epidemic at this point. And so there needs to be some coordination from the federal government. And that's kind of different in our political system. It's difficult and it is a challenge.
Thinking about Massachusetts specifically, something in Politico caught my eye and essentially pointed out that the script has really been flipped here for Massachusetts. I want to quote something. It says, a state that has seen itself as operating counter to Washington lawmakers now finds itself dependent on them. What move can Governor Charlie Baker make knowing that that's what he's confronted with?
Well, I think he has to try to play a fine balance like the rest of these governors. And that means you might not like everything that the federal government is doing, but you're going to need their help at some point. You're going to need their help with resources. You're going to need their help with coordination. But you want to make sure that they know the urgency of the problem in your state and that you need to handle it sometimes in unique ways. And I think the governor's doing a pretty good job of that, as the governors are really standouts in this thing right now. Many of them are taking big leadership roles, and it doesn't, it's Republican and Democrat. They really are pursuing, something extraordinary, and some of them are handling it quite well.
To your point, looking at the governors who you say, to your point, have been standouts, do you see less of a partisan drive here from those governors?
I think that the most successful governors right now are looking beyond partisanship, and they're trying to do what most good leaders do in a crisis, and that is to say, we're in this together. You think of people like Winston Churchill, pointing that out during the Blitz of London. And so that's what these governors are trying to do. Now, politics inevitably is going to, you could say, get in the way. But there's real disagreements about how to address this and who should get, for instance, the resources from Washington. How much should it be the individuals? How much should it be businesses? And those are essentially political questions sometimes that people don't agree with. So there's going to be some of that. We hope our leaders get together in that quickly and help the American people more broadly.
Yeah, we saw Governor Baker this week really speak pretty forcibly about the fact that that's frustrating him and tying the hands of people here in Massachusetts while Washington goes back and forth over this potential bill that would help give some disaster relief during COVID-19.
I'm sure the governor is working closely with the U.S. representatives and senators from Massachusetts to kind of smooth that out. But you need the power of the federal government to really come down and provide those types of resources and guidance. Right now, the initial stages, it's like I said, it's very good that localities are taking things into their own hands and dealing with things as they come up. But you really need a national presence at this point, and that's what Charlie Baker is concerned about.
Well, meanwhile, the business of day-to-day governing on Beacon Hill has also been challenged by this. I've spoken with several reps and senators who confided that, essentially business has come to a halt. There's not really much going on other than COVID-19 related business. And this time of year, typically we would be talking about the proposed budget cycle almost nonstop. Leadership have come out and said it's unlikely that we'll see that proposed budget come April. As you look at this, and whether it's the budget or other items, Do you think that we're cruising toward an inevitability here of doing some type of online legislating?
I think it's something they have to consider. Congress, for instance, hasn't really thought too carefully about what happens in a crisis and how they're going to handle this, and even less so state legislatures. So I think they're going to have to be pretty nimble in thinking about, okay, should we have sessions from afar? And that really changes the nature of an institution. Legislatures are deliberative bodies. You meet with people, you talk with them face to face, you get to know them. So it's going to be a big challenge, but they can't shrink from this challenge because we need government more than ever to be making decisions, not just about what's going on right now, but thinking 3, 4, 5 months, a year ahead of time. We need our budgets. We need to know. Communities can't plan things unless they know the types of resources and help they're going to be getting. So this is really all hands on deck.
Nationally, it's a presidential election cycle, although it feels like that has just vaporized in the wake of this. Super Tuesday was less than a month ago. That just boggles my mind completely. But now the real question on the table is what does happen to November? I've read several accounts that said, the election won't or can't be canceled. But what's your take on that?
The federal election is set in the Constitution and by state law. So it's going to be hard to change it, and they should not change it. We have not changed our federal elections. We've been through wars, civil wars. We've been through the pandemic in 1918, and we kept doing the elections. So, but there are some remedies that the states can take to make it easier for people to vote. And some of the things would be more early voting, to be able to drop off your ballot at some location, getting what we'd call no excuse absentee ballot, because in many states, including Massachusetts, you have to come up with an excuse, some medical reason or some emergency why you can't. They should loosen those, I think, to make sure that as many people as possible vote in the November election. Democracy has to keep going on. You cannot suspend democracy when there's a thing like this.
But we've seen so many primaries already delayed. Now, arguably, Super Tuesday happened, and then the following Tuesday after that, we saw a lot of delegates already assigned in those two contests. But still, primaries need to happen in several other states. What do we do about this?
That's a really good point. I mean, they've delayed them in several states. Primaries are a little different. They're, how parties are choosing their nominees. It's not written into the Constitution. The states have much more flexibility. The important thing is that they hold them. They can say, okay, given the pandemic right now, for public health reasons, we're going to delay. And they're very clear about how long it's going to be and the contingencies they're going to take. And that's what I think many governors are doing. They're going to come at some point, maybe butt heads with public health officials who say, this is still dangerous. So that's why state legislation and governors really have to get their game together on how we're going to allow people to vote in ways that don't put their health at risk.
Yeah, to that point that about, in-person voting is likely dangerous. We'd probably hear that from public health officials. Alternative voting plans, though, look at Iowa. The caucus was such a mess, having some sort of digital interface there. Would the electorate even trust an electoral process that was related to technology if that was the route that leaders chose to take?
Yeah, well, that is a risk. And that's why you still want to offer voters many different opportunities to get their ballot to be checked. And that I don't want to underestimate the states that do like all mail ballots, Oregon, Washington. They've been doing this for many election cycles. They have a lot of practice. So we should look to them to see where they thought they were making mistakes. But the important thing is we have to give resources to our election administrators to make sure, and that some of those resources have to come from Washington. And that's why I'm glad to see that Congress was, in fact, talking about that, so states can begin to set this apparatus up.
Something else I was thinking about, looking a little more long-term at the way that this has impacted presidential election processes. We saw a lot of town hall meetings that maybe would have been held in person, moving digitally, things like that. And I was thinking about the potential implications for candidates and how that might open up the field. If you go all virtual and you're holding virtual town halls instead of flying state to state, moving your election people with you everywhere you go, the amount of money that's spent on elections would be drastically changed by something like that. Is there an opportunity here to sort of change the playbook?
Yeah, this is a huge experiment. The only thing close to it was 1918, when people would definitely gather for rallies, and instead politicians have to post things in newspapers and send out mail. So politicians are going to have to change how they campaign. Many of them are using social media. There's going to be bans in place, I'm sure, for gatherings. And we might see a migration that's already happening towards the online forums for getting together. But let's not forget that some of the biggest, most enthusiastic political events have been rallies where people get together and support their candidates, whoever they may be, and debates. How do you hold debates from afar like that? We've seen some examples. So this is really changing how we think about political campaigns, and it might affect going forward. And as you point out, the costs of campaigns could shift dramatically with this new type of campaigning.
What are you going to be keeping your eye on as you watch this unfold?
I will be, of course, as I mentioned, how are they going to change the way we administer elections? And of course, I'm interested in, both short and long-term outcomes. The short outcome is what's going to happen in the next election. Who's going to be punished? Who is not, in terms of the outcomes, especially at the federal level. Usually when there's a good economy, the president wins. The economy's tanking, but our models don't predict pandemics. I'm also curious to see what will happen. How will we change our politics, regardless of partisanship, and how we think about the institutions that are put in place to deal with emergencies, and how that affects everyday politics in terms of the organizations that are around, the lobbying, the money that gets spent on social programs. There's a lot of implications here that are going to have lasting effects.